All right, welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Space Prize Speaker Series. We are thrilled to have Chris Sembroski from the Inspiration 4 crew here with us today. He is a passionate space educator himself, and I'm really excited to have him join us and to share with all of you a little bit about his career trajectory, the Inspiration 4 mission, of course, and support systems for commercial astronauts. So going to be really fun to dive into all of that. I've got just a few introductory words about Space Prize and about the series before we dive in, and then I will hand it off to our host, Dr. Lesley Anderson. So I'm Mark Wagner. I'm the president of Space Prize Foundation, and I am joined today by Dr. Lesley Anderson, who will be running most of the interview with Chris. We're really thrilled to have her, and I'll introduce her properly in a moment as well. Space Prize is about to complete our first contest, which is a challenge in New York City. Space Prize, the foundation as a whole, is focused on universal space literacy, or more specifically on encouraging students, particularly young women, to pursue STEAM education and explore careers in the growing space industry. In New York City, we've worked with 5 schools in the 5 boroughs of the city. In January, they had an essay contest at each school. In February, the finalists were invited to participate in a video contest. Our judging was in March, and by the end of March, in fact, our top 25 finalists from around the city were included in a simulated mission to Mars at the Challenger Center in Manhattan. That same week, as luck would have it, they got their names up for a full week on giant billboards in Times Square, which, as you can imagine, for New York City kids, was fantastic. As I've shared before, they drove grandparents into the city to see it and everything. 5 of our winners, although 4 pictured here, made it to the Space Camp Lift program, which is Space Camp's new leadership program in Huntsville, Alabama. So a great opportunity for them to get out of the city and experience something pretty spectacular that Chris knows all about. Hopefully we'll hear more about Space Camp today. And 5 of our winners in 3 days are going to be going up for a parabolic zero-G flight where they will experience micro and zero gravity. I have a few exciting elements about Saturday's event to add in that we haven't really shared before in this forum. Through a partnership with Gaze in Space, Star Trek's Denise Crosby will also be joining the girls on the plane. She played Tasha Yar and a number of recurring characters in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And she's the director of the Trekkies documentary, which just hit its 25th anniversary and got a re-release with that. So she'll be there with the girls. We also have, as I've mentioned here, we've been working with some zero-G fashion designers, and they've actually created accessories for the girls to wear on the flight. So they're going to have a space flower backpack that kind of unfurls in zero-G and some cool eyewear that they'll be wearing on Saturday. So congratulations to our winners. 1 girl from each borough of the city is going to experience zero-G this Saturday. To see some of the other programs that we have at Space Prize, just visit our website at spaceprize.org. I want to highlight a couple of things coming up next month in June. One is we are launching the Space Prize Paris Challenge. So this will all be in French, and it's going to be very similar to the New York City Challenge, except, of course, it'll be happening in Paris. We're working in particular with a school that is focused on, what's the right word? Aerospace broadly, but it's an aviation school. So they've got a lot of really cool kids there, and the girls are excelling in that program as well. But same thing, there'll be an essay contest and a video contest and a zero-G flight on Air Zero-G, which will fly out of France early next year. Also launching in June and more applicable to everybody in our audience from around the globe is our space education curriculum, or the first half of it anyway, second half due by the end of the summer. You can see just a top level outline of what we cover there in terms of why space is important, what we've gotten out of it, what we stand to get out of it, the skill sets and mindsets that students will need to be successful in humanity's multi-planet future, regardless of whether or not they're working in the space industry. And then everything from an introduction to space science and the solar system through to an in-depth look at the new space economy and bigger philosophical issues like governance, ethics, sustainability, and humanity's potential role as the shepherd of life through the solar system and beyond. It's pretty ambitious. And Lesley's working with us on that too. I want to also at least plug the fact that my own book is due out in June if all goes well. This is 12 academic papers that I wrote focused on the topic, starting with how do we best prepare students today for humanity's multi-planet future, and moving on to how might we educate students when we do have civilian settlements and we have people migrating to Mars and elsewhere. So something I thought might interest this crowd. Now, one of the other things we're doing for all students, educators, and enthusiasts around the world is this speaker series. As you see, we've got astronauts like Chris, and engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs, designers, lawyers, historians, you name it. Yes, we have a space historian coming on the show, which is very, very cool. But encourage you guys to tune in live every week. Wednesdays, usually 4 p.m. Pacific. And all past episodes are going up on our YouTube channel. Finally, some participation norms. We definitely want those of you who are here to participate in the chat. So let us know where you're from and fire away with questions anytime. Oh, I see somebody in San Francisco and Everett, Washington. Fantastic. And I know we've got Mexico and Pakistan already representing. And Kansas, fantastic. So do use the raise hand feature if you've got something to add, but also, frankly, with this smaller group, feel free to just interrupt unless it gets to be a problem. That'll be just fine. And feel free to unmute or even share screen when you're invited to do that. If you need help, you can just put it in the chat, or you can use the help feature, and that'll send me a message, and I'll see what I can do. We may leave wait time, just as a heads up, between questions to see, if Chris has more to say, and also to see if any of you are going to share your thoughts or share questions in the chat. So if there's a brief pause, that's okay. It's by design. All right, I do need to introduce once again Dr. Lesley Anderson. We're glad to have you back, Lesley. Bailey was fantastic last week, but it's great to have you back as well. So Lesley is a teacher. She taught at the high-tech high school in California. She has worked in a number of marine biology capacities, studying, among other things, great white sharks. And she's done research in climate change at the South Pole. And she's now a Einstein Distinguished Educator working in Washington, D.C., stationed at the Library of Congress, which she shared earlier is the most beautiful building in D.C., or maybe she said the country. But I'll let her clear that up as I hand it over to Lesley, and she'll take it from here.
Thanks, Mark. I said in the world, but I think at least in the country is the Jefferson Building is beautiful if you've never been to visit. But I'm here today and I have the distinct honor and privilege of introducing Chris Sembroski, an American data engineer, Air Force veteran, and commercial astronaut. He has long had an interest in space, being an amateur astronomer and rocketeer. Chris grew up in North Carolina, and during college, he volunteered for ProSpace, a nonprofit organization advocating for private spaceflight. Chris was also a counselor at Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, which promotes science, technology, engineering, and math to children and teenagers. After college, Chris joined the United States Air Force as an electromechanical technician. Chris is a Lockheed Martin employee and astronaut for the Inspiration4 mission. Chris was featured on the cover of a Time magazine double issue with the rest of the crew of Inspiration4 in August 2021. Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And I first just want to open it up and allow you to tell us a little bit about your professional career.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Mark and Lesley, for having me on today. It's been an honor to be invited to talk to everyone who's been a part of Space Prize and will hopefully continue to be part of it, and for all the girls that will be coming into the program for years to come. So awesome. I thank you for the introduction, Lesley. Also, things change so fast that your introduction was great. I'm no longer with Lockheed anymore, but that's okay. I'm moving on to different things, and it's awesome. And believe it or not, when I was working at Space Camp, I did so out of Titusville, Florida, when they had that camp there. That really got my interest into space because I was able to give tours at Kennedy Space Center, but the connection to Huntsville is still there because everything goes through Huntsville, and that's where we have so many different events going on continuously with Inspiration4. Maybe we'll talk some more about that later. But yeah, my trajectory to get to where I am today and how did I end up on Inspiration4? Just like you mentioned, I had a lifelong love of space. Astronomy, building model rockets. I was really encouraged to go beyond my comfort zone when it came to physics in high school, I had a professor who wouldn't settle for anything less than our very best. In fact, he'd hold his chalk up on the chalkboard and just pause there after he said, "Okay, all right, everyone, what's the next piece that I need to put right down?" And he'd pause for a moment, and the class was silent. He would still stay there, and then he'd pull his chalk down, and then he'd just turn around and look at us with his arms folded and a nice little curt smile on his face, just walk out the door and wait till we figured out the answer to keep going. So he really encouraged us to go on, but and know what we were coming into. And and so I really considered that I was going to go after what was maybe a little bit uncomfortable and accept those greater challenges. When I got to college, it was at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, planes and rockets. That was all everyone ever thought about there. Obviously, with Kennedy Space Center being just a 90-minute drive south, and being able to see all the space shuttle launches from campus, and being able to see and hear a launch from close up from time to time, those are things that stick with you and really kind of awaken up your soul and say, "Hey, I've got to be a part of this amazing thing called space." Did I ever think I was actually going to be a part of the astronaut corps? No, no way. And so I was always excited to try to be close to rockets or to be close to aerospace. And that's how I joined the Air Force. I wanted to be somehow close to rockets. And so I used my analytical brain and my skills and worked on our ICBMs in Montana as part of the electromechanical team, making sure that they were kept up to date and secure in the ground. And then that's where I met my wife, and we decided to move out to Seattle. Because I tell you what, even though the job description in the Air Force says you can go to California, you can go to Florida, what they really mean is everybody goes to the middle of the country where there is nothing except rockets that are buried in the ground that don't go anywhere. And then there's one person that goes to California and one person that goes to Florida. So we decided, let's leave the flat, brown, and windy. Let's go out to where the water is and the mountains are. And this is where my wife and I have been for the past, oh gosh, several years. I guess 15 years now. And I got into building automation and controls. So I used my technician skills of troubleshooting, a little bit of programming, started learning how buildings operate and how we can save energy and do better for the planet. And by extension, it felt like, okay, I'm doing something bigger than just earning a paycheck. I'm helping make people's lives better every day, and I'm also helping by reducing our energy consumption and waste. So from there, moved to analytics, started understanding, okay, now I know how to make a building work, but why, or catch a problem before it becomes a problem. And so I started getting into analytics, fault detection, and moved on. And that's how I ended up going to Lockheed Martin, is that they had a position that was open, and I was thinking, all right, great, here's a chance to get closer back to aerospace. And so I got in with their Rotary and Mission Support Division, which is their helicopter division, and was doing more fault detection, helping them run their buildings across the US and around the world more efficiently. And then a funny thing happened, and I got a phone call one Saturday morning from someone called Inspiration 4, and I didn't have my phone on me, and so it was my wife's morning to sleep in on a Saturday, and she kept looking at the phone and silencing it, and eventually I came back upstairs and said, "Chris, come get your phone. Someone called Inspiration 4 keeps calling you." And it's like, I don't know who that is. I couldn't remember. I did not remember that I'd entered the contest a month prior by donating to St. Jude. I finally gave them a call back, and then through various things, I get on a Zoom call, much like this, with Jared Isaacman and Scott Petit, or Kid, the next day. And next thing you know, come to find out that my friend Kyle had won actually the contest and had given his seat over to me, and that they were welcoming me to be on board this crew of Inspiration 4. And by the way, in 3 days, we're coming to pick you up. So then the whirlwind began. And I couldn't believe that from just trying to be close to and around rockets and always be that person that maybe somebody thought of when it came to aerospace, that next thing you know, I'm the person right down the middle, and had an amazing year, met an incredible number of people who are very passionate about what they do. Uh, Built an incredible crew with Inspiration 4 between Jared, Cyan, Haley, myself. We couldn't ask for a better crew. And then from there on out, it was such an amazing mission. And we raised a whole lot of money for Inspiration for St. Jude. So that was probably the best incredible thing about it all, is that as you're doing something exciting and cool in space, you have this other great opportunity to do really cool things and solve problems here on Earth. And that's probably a big part of what a lot of people are interested in doing in space. So uh, that's where I was last year, and now I'm here with you. Like I said, I'm no longer with Lockheed. I'm now with a company that's doing analytics and engineering and on the cutting edge of technology to try to bring that to more customers. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. But really excited to talk about all those different things that I had to go through last year and what my family went through during the process. What does it take to go to space? Well, I think we can hit on some more of those topics, right, Lesley?
Absolutely. And I know we want to talk about going to space, but I'm going to take you back to something that you talked about earlier on. And it's
Yeah.
mostly because I'm really excited. Next week, I actually get to go to space camp as an educator. And so I want to hear how space camp has like been a big part of your trajectory. And don't give me any spoilers for what I'm
Oh
going
my
to be
gosh.
experiencing, but how did this help to propel and fuel your career and your excitement about space?
Well, you don't find any more passionate people about space than the folks that are working at space camp, and especially educators. I mean, space camp's built around promoting science and technology in students. And it was always really cool to see the weeks when teachers came in, because they would all get together. And no offense to teachers, but they're the worst students, which is great. They're so excited, they're so enthusiastic, but they're talkative and out loud, not raising their hands, which is great. But they're all excited to be there, and they're learning how to do education using space as the medium to get kids interested in these topics. And for me, Space Camp was an opportunity to see that excitement and enthusiasm in other people, and to be supportive of my passion. And they were all supportive of my passions of exploring space and rocketry. And it also gave me the opportunity to meet lots of interesting other people, the folks that are wanting to be part of space programs and explore rockets, understand more about the history of space. So it was really neat to see how space kind of became the theme, but it wasn't necessarily the end all be all. It was more of that excitement about space that really encouraged kids and teachers to see how can we use it to talk about, math or problem solving or teamwork, or what does it look like to develop new technology, or are my aerodynamics quite right? Did I really have to pay attention when I was gluing the fin on my model rocket perfectly? Well, you can find out at the rocket launch field a couple days later. So it was one of those things where you really just had a group of really supportive people that were excited about the same things that you're excited about.
That's awesome. What can you tell us about Space Camp's 40th anniversary?
Oh gosh. So yeah, 40 years ago this year, Space Camp was founded, and over the years, Space Camp expanded out. They've had programs in Florida, they've had programs in California, Turkey, and other programs around the world. But the main hub has always been at Huntsville, Alabama, where they've had, the different space camps and Academy, Aviation Challenge, Cyber Camp. They've got a number of different opportunities for kids that might be interested in something that may not be necessarily all just space related, but you can get involved with airplanes and computer programming and still feel like you are at space camp, because you are. And so the 40th anniversary is coming up this year, and it's exciting. There's a lot of new things happening at camp. For years, and Space Camp opened when the space shuttle was the way to go to space. So everything for years has been centered around the space shuttle, and we are slowly seeing changes in the space industry on how to go to space. I mean, obviously last year was huge between, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, SpaceX. They are building a new building for education there, thanks to Boeing. There's going to be an announcement at the 4th anniversary, talking about how we're going to be building a new training facility because, yeah, believe it or not, the little tent structure there that's housing some of their simulators is now on the National Register of like historic buildings, I think it is. But so they're gonna be extending and building out new facilities, enhancing the experience, and updating it in incredible ways. Inspiration 4 crew is going to be there, and lots of other folks are excited to be a part of the whole process. There have been so many astronauts and people that have gone through the doors of Space Camp over the years, and it's another time for us to celebrate.
I'm
Lesley,
so
can I?
excited now. Go ahead, Mark.
I just want to draw attention to Jackie's comment in the chat. I don't know if you got a chance to see that. She's been to Space Camp 16 times and has taken 1,000 students and parents with her from Australia. Jackie, I don't know if you want to pipe in and say anything about that, but that's just inspiring.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, hi everyone. I went to Space Camp in 2007 and walked out and said, why don't we have one in Australia? So my life's ambition is to build one here in Sydney, Australia. So in the meantime, I've fundraised at barbecues and selling chocolates and heaven knows what else, and help people get grants. So it's not just about kids who can afford to go, it's about the kids that have a dream and want to go. And I work hand in hand with the community to make that happen. So the Space Camp Hall of Fame, I'm friends with a fair few of those people, Ed Van Sice and Burke Hare and a whole lot of other people who I've got to be great friends with over time. And the thing with COVID is it stopped us from going. We had 150 people signed up for our last trip and we had to cancel. So I'm looking forward to getting back to Space Camp. And it's a great place. It changed my life and it changes lives. It's a place that you go in a person and you come out totally different, believing in yourself. It's a magical place and I love it so much.
No, it absolutely is. It's when COVID really hit and they had to really close their doors for a year, it was devastating, and the camp looked like it was on the brink of closure. And so many people, I'm sure you might have been included in that, but between Boeing and a lot of other individuals, they all donated to kind of keep the doors open, and it was an incredible outpouring around the world of how much people really care about space education, and it was exciting to see that they were able to keep the doors open long enough to get through COVID. And then all of a sudden, I think there's just incredible rush of excitement, and I know they're sold out as much as they can be, at least through the rest of this year. And I think they're already looking at most of next year.
Yeah, and the hard thing from Australia is the whole COVID thing. I don't know a
Right.
solution. I've been racking my brains, working very hard. The hard thing for us is we gave back every cent to every person who booked with us. And so money and financials are very critical. And our planning, it takes 18 months to get a trip there. So we've started gearing up again. There's some issues that we can't resolve at this point, but I'm sure we'll get through them because we need to take kids there, and it needs to be a global effort, just like the space industry is.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You guys have me so excited for next week, and I promise not to rub it in too much about how much fun we're having, but thank you for sharing all of the great wisdom about that, Chris. I'm going to switch back to asking you some questions about your last year, because you've said this has been really as much as Space Camp was transformative. But my question for you is, how was your training important to the Inspiration 4 mission?
Right. There were a lot of different ways in which we trained, right? I think Jared had this definite idea of how he wanted things to go and how to really kind of test the crew and put us through uncomfortable situations, like climbing Mount Rainier. It really wasn't about, okay, can you climb a mountain? It was like, can you suffer and be happy about it? So can you be okay when the rest of your body is really upset and not feeling good? And can you still encourage one another? We did a lot of team building exercises, not quite as extreme as that, but I mean, that was one of them. And that was really a good analog for space. We did a lot of training when it came to understanding our own individual selves. We went through the whole centrifuge process. Like, do we even know what it's going to feel like when we go into space on this rocket? What does it feel like to experience G forces? Well, going to NASTAR and going through the centrifuge and getting those 6 Gs through our chest was a great way to kind of build that confidence. And that was really fun for me. I don't know if anybody's watched the Netflix documentary, but ignore that last part. Okay, Mark's thumbs upping at the moment. Yeah, I got sick, but I had fun doing it. And I think that was kind of part of it. So you can have fun while you're not really feeling great. And so we did some of that. We did a lot of training when it came to the book work and studying. We had to know all the systems aboard Dragon and understand how they interact with Falcon. We had to understand the processes and procedures for what we can control and what we can change in case something goes wrong or goes off nominal. So we did a lot of practicing and going through emergency procedures. And we also we did some fighter jet flying. I don't know if it was exactly analog to flying in space, but it was about being in a very dynamic environment and being able to function still. And can you handle that? And we all could. We were all smiling through that too, and having a lot of fun and getting our own little stick time as these former Thunderbird pilots and the flight demonstration team pilots are taking us through the paces. That was a lot of fun, and couldn't have done it without a big team supporting us behind the scenes. So a lot of that training that way. Gosh, there's so much to talk about. We even had to try on the different food. We had to make sure we could get in and out of our space suits quickly, and make sure we zipped them up and had good seals every time. And so a lot of different things like that. Getting familiar with our environment. We did really long simulations on the ground where we did one 30-hour-long simulation where we were inside the Dragon simulator for 30 hours. We didn't leave the platform. I think that still holds the record at SpaceX. So we slept and did all our experiments, went through some emergency procedures during those times. And at the end of the 30 hours, I think we knew we had a pretty good crew when we were all kind of looking around and saying, oh, it's over now? You sure? We could keep going. But so it was neat. Once we got into space, it was a lot easier, right? We had a lot more space. No pun intended. But that was some of the training that we did individually, physically, mentally, a lot of. Speaking of physically, we did a lot of working out with physical trainers to make sure our bodies were strong for at least our core sections and in our necks. We didn't want to get whiplash. And oh gosh, there's so many different things we had to do, but it did take a lot of time out of our normal days, and I think the training was longer than I think we all expected, but it was very well done and thought out.
So Liam wants to know, how did you fit the training around your regular life or work?
Right. So that was the big surprise. I think we all had the intention that we were going to do this on like long weekends. So I was going to do my day job during the week, and then we'd spend like 4-day weekends on to kind of do the space training. And they'll get there. They're not there now. It ended up where we were spending long weeks, 12-hour days, 5 days a week during training, starting early, running late at Hawthorne in California, doing our training. And eventually it got to the point where I was burning, my candle at both ends. And it's like, okay, I'm trying to get in some overtime to make up for some of these days. And then it was either I was working all day long or doing a little bit of overtime and then going right into space training. It was not sustainable. It just wasn't. I wasn't able to see my family. And so at one point or another, it's like, okay, money's temporary, right? And this was going to be something that is forever experience, something that really sticks with you. So I ended up having to take a leave of absence of about 2.5, 3 months before the mission from my job. And they were supportive of letting me take that time. And so that's really what I had to do, because I really wanted to make sure that I was spending that time that I had away from space training with my family. I mean, when you're done at the end of the day and come back from space, who are you coming back to? You're coming back to your family. And who's going to be affected most by a trip to space individually as a parent? It's going to be your family, whether it's a positive or a negative experience. Either way, it's your family that's going to be there at the end of it, who is going to be changed the most. And they're the ones that you want to spend the most time with. So that made a whole lot of sense to me as to why it made more sense to take the time away from work to spend it with them, and just really have just one full-time job instead of two.
So speaking of family, what support systems were put in place for your families, and what support systems are put in place for the families of NASA astronauts?
Hey, that's a really great question. And I think we have a long history of government astronauts flying into space. There is a astronaut spouse there is an astronaut support office for spouses and families at NASA, and they do a pretty good job. They've learned over the years what to do and what not to do. And when we learned through some tragic moments about where do you really want to have the cameras and where do you not want to have the cameras? Where do you want to provide privacy in those moments when the stress is high and tensions are high? So for for NASA astronauts, there have been a lot of protocols set up. Uh, the fun thing about being an all civilian mission is that we didn't have to go through NASA, and so we got to rewrite the book. The challenge is that we had to rewrite the book and do it our own way. And so there were not actually a lot of supports that maybe we would have all taken for granted. There was a lot of supports, a lot of check-ins when it came to how are you feeling, Chris? How are you doing, Haley? How are you doing, Cy? Jared, how's your team feeling today? And he's just doing his nod with his cup of coffee. If he has a large coffee, he's good. But there wasn't a whole lot of attention paid to our families up front. Now, granted, I think my situation was unique. A lot of folks that are traveling to space have that intention and have discussed it for a long time with their family. My wife had like 2.5, 3 days before I was whisked off from being told that I'm going to space to now I'm going through medical training. And so the whole process, there was not a whole lot given to her at the very beginning. And so it was really left on to me to try to explain to her what Space 101 is. There was a lot of things that I took for granted, partly because of Space Camp, that people know, and that people don't know things, and that's especially your family. And so talking to them about what is a rocket launch going to look like? What are the different stages of the Falcon? Where am I going to be spending my time for 3 days? What's that going to look like? Where are they going to be during the launch? How are they going to be fed? Are they going to be with me in quarantine? Are they not? All the little logistics that you normally do together as a mom and a dad, it essentially became, my wife being a single parent for a long time while I'm off doing training. And not always, and she was oftentimes kept in the dark. So until I got back as to what was happening. Being the first mission to space as an all civilian crew, the schedule changed a lot. Things happened quickly and schedules changed at the last moment. So we had to be very flexible, and it's stressful when you're trying to plan bedtimes and you're trying to plan, people going to school and doing homework. It was a very, very, very big challenge that she had to overcome. And I think through it all, it was some of the additional supports that we ended up needing the most were related to, okay, dad's going away for a little while, he's doing all this training. It's very much like a military deployment. And that's something my wife and I went through together back when we were first dating in Great Falls, Montana. So I was deployed to Iraq, and she and I were, just dating at the time, and it actually brought us closer together. But this time, when you have children involved, you've got kids, it's kind of a completely different scenario, because if something goes wrong, it's their lives that are going to be affected the most. And it's going to be her left to raise them on her own. And so are there things in place that are going to be there and support her in case things go wrong. And it was just such a crazy thing, where there would be moments where I'm going on a zero-G flight and going to Morimoto's restaurant in Las Vegas, and then get on the phone with my wife later that evening and want to be all excited and tell her how cool this is. And I could still hear my youngest in the background screaming. And I hear that they went through the drive-through at Wendy's at the last moment, and it's like that we're having very different experiences. And so going through some of uh, those experiences and going through some of those counseling moments that were offered was incredibly important, and to recognize that we both had to be there for each other, whether we were both going through a really high, exciting time or a really challenging, traumatic time. Being able to pause for a moment and go down to each other's places of need were really important.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's sometimes hard for us to think, how do we have relatable experiences? But even with family members, that's a big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it can happen to anyone who's experiencing something new or exciting, right? So if your partner or your friends, or maybe they won a championship, and now all these people want to do some interviews with them, and get their name in the newspaper on the news. Well, what's that do to your other friends or to your siblings or your other friends, or to you? Like, how do you feel about that? How do you weave into the moment? Do their heads get too big for the doorway? How do they stay grounded and be there with you while still being able to celebrate these exciting moments?
You're a great life coach. Thank you for sharing all of this wisdom with us. What can you tell us about what you and Aaron have planned for the families of commercial astronauts?
Right. So a lot of this stuff of going through this process, my wife Erin and I have really, well, mostly her. She saw a problem in what she wasn't getting and what she felt like she needed, and so she created it. And being an educator herself, she teaches sixth grade in a challenging school that sees both the highly capable students come in from all over the district to the ones that are part of transient families, where the older siblings are kind of helping to raise the younger ones, where mom and dad might have 2, 3 part-time jobs to kind of make ends meet. Or some students are homeless. And so it's a challenging environment to be a teacher. And so knowing and recognizing the emotional needs of students is front of mind for her, and not just for students, but for families and for kids. And so the idea is that building up a network and building up a conversation with other folks that are going through astronaut experiences is really important, because there are other astronaut spouses, there are other astronaut families, even on suborbital flights. There are folks that are being supported by their partners, and those other people are stressed, and they're nervous, and they're worried. They've seen all the bad stuff being highlighted in movies and in TV, and it's really important to have someone to have that conversation with you as you go through those experiences. You start out thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is so exciting! It's those Top Gun moments. You're high-fiving everybody." To, "Wait a minute, I got to go stand in front of a camera with a smile, saying I'm happy, and I'm proud, and I'm thrilled." To where you're feeling alone at some points, and then it's okay. It's a roller coaster. You're high and excited emotionally at some times, and there are times where you just need a volleyball to talk to. So like Wilson and Tom Hanks. I'm visualizing her slide where she's got that exact picture on there. If you haven't seen Castaway, then that just aged me a little bit. Sorry, kids, but it's okay. It's a Tom Hanks. He's talking to a volleyball on a deserted island because he's painted a face on it. That's like his only friend. And so you can imagine being in that moment where you just want someone to talk to. And then the roller coaster just keeps going until finally you're at the end where we splash down and you come back and rejoin after the end of the mission.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for the Tom Hanks reference.
Yeah.
So the question everyone's been wondering about, what was space like, and how did it impact your entire life?
Oh man, that's sometimes you ask those broad questions. They seem so easy, yet they're so hard to answer, because which part of space, what is the launch itself was incredibly smooth and exciting and thrilling. You have those moments like, we've trained for this, we're finally going, to realizing there have been fewer than 600 people at this point that have seen the Earth like this, which is an incredible thing to think about, that there are more people in Congress than have been in space. And there are more people that have been in the NBA than have been in space. So that weighs on your mind. Once you're up in space though, and even before you get out of your seat, just the way the light comes through the window from the sun and just lights up the interior of the cabin. It's one of those most beautiful, purest, bright lights you can imagine. It's not being diffused by the atmosphere. It's just pure and beautiful. Then once you get out of your seat and you take your first glances out the side windows, it's breathtaking. We really lucked out when we were born here on Earth, right? It's a beautiful place, and being able to see the Earth through the cupola, that bubble window that we had on top of Dragon that looks like a McDonald's playground bubble, but space rated, and being able to see the entire circumference, entire horizon of the Earth uninterrupted. It really, for me, showed me that there are boundaries and there are a finite amount of resources here on Earth. That what Yuri Gagarin has kind of talked about when he was alive, said that Earth is too small for conflict, yet just big enough for cooperation. Because those resources that we have here on Earth, they are not unlimited. We were able to see these giant smoke plumes coming out of Brazil in South America that were from wildfires that were just kind of clearing the land. And you were able to see some of the wildfires in the central part of Australia. And those are a lot smaller, but you're able to understand that we do have a profound impact on the planet that we live on. And you see those lines of the atmosphere, that it is only so thick. And beyond that little green bluish line of the edge of the atmosphere, when you're going through the night side, it's easy to spot that beyond that, there is no life that we found yet. And so I felt like this great responsibility and duty to want to share that message. And when I looked back at Earth, I was seeing all these incredible places that I wanted to go and visit and be there in person, touching those things, like mountains, Andes Mountains in South America, or like the beautiful blue waters off the coast of Australia. Those were phenomenal sights to see. Saw a lot of the South Pacific Ocean, and it really just also reminded me that Earth is very dynamic and continuously changing and alive apart from people. And you get far enough up in altitude, people individually disappear, but you can still see that Earth itself is dynamic and it's alive. And you see that through lightning through the tops of clouds on night passes that produces some of the most amazing fireworks show I think I have ever seen. I kind of compare it to, if you're in your bed late at night and you lift up the blankets and look down at your toes and you see a little bit of a static electricity, waving back and forth around your toes. That's what was happening between Mexico and Canada along this storm front. But it wasn't just a one moment in time thing. This entire band of storms was just lit up with lightning that just never seemed to stop. And it was such a great reminder of how dynamic and incredible place Earth is.
Chris, you are rivaling the great William Shatner with your poetic description of your perspective on space.
It's crazy to think too that if it's 4 minutes in space, that when he came back and I was listening to him, that he got it. He I don't know how he did that in 4 minutes, but he totally gets it.
He was focused, but I agree, Lesley. We could pull that clip out later of Chris talking just now. It's just perfect. Yeah.
I know, it was amazing. Thank you. We have a couple questions in the chat that I want to make sure we get to. And again, feel free to put your questions in there, or if you want to raise your hand and unmute and ask them. But Liam's wondering, I think I heard you were the orbit official photographer. What was that like? Can you tell us about the challenges that represented?
Well, one of the things I've always known about any event that you go and visit is you take behind your memories, or you take with you your memories and the pictures. And I think it was Mike Massimino who told me that he was once told that that's what you get, and your memories fade. So take as many pictures as possible. So uh, that, and so I was. We had some good mentoring as well. We had some photography lessons. John Krause help us get up to speed on our photography, and we had a mentor session with John Pettit for a little while, a famous NASA astronaut photographer, who gave us an idea of what types of things we should be taking pictures of. So I felt it was something I could do, and something I really wanted to do, is to bring those pictures back. And I probably stole as much time up in the cupola as I possibly could, to be able to take as many pictures as possible. It was I could have just stayed up there all day.
Liam, go ahead and expand on your question.
Let me unmute. And by the way, this is live from the space station right now. But what I wanted to bring up, if I can just switch over to this, was this a representation of the kind of electrical storm that you would see?
I know. Yeah, I was watching Starliner depart today, and I think people are watching Starliner depart. I think I was looking down when it was over Singapore, looking at the storms. Yeah, it's exactly that. That's what you're seeing.
This is real. This was captured real time over Lincoln, Nebraska, from the space station, and obviously you were higher up, right, as well.
Yeah, and the speed that you see compared at our altitude of 590 kilometers compared to the station at 425, it's a noticeable difference in speed, and it feels much quicker when you're down at the space station altitude, and you feel like you can take it all in a little bit more slowly at 600 kilometers that we were flying over at. But that's exactly it. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
I love how you represented the difference between the altitudes and what that was like for you, because I think a number of us here have done the Infinite experience. I don't know whether you've been down there yet. I hear it's opened over in somewhere up near
it's
you,
in
right?
Tacoma,
in Tacoma,
Washington. Yeah, they had it in Houston. Cy and I got a chance to go while we were there, but yeah, I've been invited to go see it at the beginning of June.
So you can remember you experienced the Infinite in Houston, and the view, which is the EVA. There's also, I think, a point where one of the clips shows a view from the cupola. So you're saying you noticed an absolute difference between your experience of looking out your cupola and the version that was represented from the space station's perspective.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the version from the space station, you may, especially at the space station when you're inside, not on EVA, your horizon's always broken up by something, whether it's a part of the window or the edge of the window. The cupola allowed us to get that EVA experience without actually being on EVA, so we could get out a little bit outside the spacecraft through that bubble essentially, and see the entire circumference of the Earth. And you can see, but I could see all of Australia at the same time at that altitude. And you don't quite get that at the space station altitude. But what you do get at the Infinite, at least I remember in the last part of the VR session, is that when you're sitting in those chairs, and if you take that time to really look around, you get that full horizon effect. And I remember seeing people walking out of there with tears in their eyes, because it is phenomenally beautiful.
Wow. So I really appreciate you sharing that difference, because you come into that with a completely unique perspective that many astronauts who've been on the space station, they don't have the experience you had. I think that's phenomenal. That blows my mind. It sort of turns it from, you spent 3 days in space, but at a place where most astronauts have never experienced. It's unique. And the fact that you, a regular guy, has done that, it is so inspirational. It moves me to know that there's someone like you that's had that experience. So it's so valuable. I think what you're sharing is just such a great way to frame what's possible for humanity. So just thanks.
Totally, yeah.
Thank you, Liam. So I have one question that I want to kind of close us out on. Chris, you mentioned in the beginning, you wanted to be rocket adjacent and space adjacent, but you didn't really think that you had, the ability to go to space. So what advice do you have for young people who might think that they're not qualified to enter the space economy?
Well, I think that question really plays into a lot of dream jobs for everyone. That if you really see this goal that, oh, I can never really be, a leading cardiac surgeon, or I can never be that person that flies like an astronaut. It can happen, but it may not happen the way you expect it. I think if you drive yourself forward in a way that people know that you are the person to come to when, like, especially for space. For me, I was always trying to get involved with clubs and activities that got me a little bit closer to space, or maybe I got to go visit an astronaut, and I've got a couple dozen glossies of astronauts from my time at space camp. But it's been kind of fun to go and be that person that people think of when it comes to, all right, who are we going to talk to when we have questions about space? And I can honestly say, if it hadn't been for my experience launching rockets, or working at space camp, or going to Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist to talk about opening up space for more people and having greater opportunity for lots of different industries and people to go to space, that I would not have been front of mind for Kyle when he was thinking of who to send in his place. And so if you come across as that avid and excited person when it comes to whatever your passion is, people are going to think of, all right, I've got an issue with my car, and who am I going to call? Oh, I'm going to call Mike, because he's always been talking about cars and has had a couple dozen projects. Whatever it is, be the expert that people know and be the squeaky wheel around it, and just keep pursuing it. I think someone has said a lot of times that, luck favors those that are prepared. And so when opportunity comes, be ready so that you can, have a little courage in your back pocket and say yes.
I love that. Thank you so much, Chris. That was a really beautiful answer. I'm going to turn it over to Mark now, who's going to help to close us out. But thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Lesley.
Yeah, what a great turn of phrase to end on. And Chris, just listening to you, particularly here at the end of the call, but throughout, you're just such a great ambassador for the mission. And, I know Jared's purpose in funding all of that was literally inspiration. And it's great to hear you speak about all this so eloquently. And such a great ambassador for space education. And we're thrilled and lucky to have you with us. So
it's been really great to be here. Yeah,
thank you,
absolutely.
Sir. And thank you, Lesley. It's great to have you back. Lesley does this on a volunteer basis too, so we're stoked to have her with us every week. And thank you for your thoughtful coordination of the interview and all the questions and everything. With lots of ideas, we wind up with an actual hour. So thank you. And thank you to everybody else who was here for contributing in the chat and asking your questions. Liam and Motasham and everybody else who piped up. And was it Jackie, I think, right? With the story from Australia is just inspiring and fantastic. Yeah. Chris, I don't know if you want to say any last words, but I'm otherwise ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, well, Mark and Lesley, thanks again for inviting me to be on here today. I hope something I said really sticks with someone who's watching this. And for those that are going to be watching it later, I think just really know that, yeah, a big part of the mission was inspiration. A big part of going to space is also doing great things for everyone else here on the ground. So it was incredible for us, and for me in particular, to know that while we're going to space and expanding out our knowledge of what we know about the universe, we're still doing incredible things to solve big problems that we have here on the ground. And just so in raising that incredible $240 million for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, it really felt like we were doing space the right way. We were bringing stuff back. And I hope that's how we continue to go and push out into the final frontier, is that we go out into space and we do good things, not just for ourselves individually, but we bring those discoveries back to make life better for everyone else here on the ground.
Awesome. Such a great place to end. Space for Earth, right?
Okay.
And before I end the recording, I do want to tease for next week's episode, we'll be talking to engineer Katrina Carter-Journet from Virgin Galactic. So we'll get that commercial space perspective from the engineer's side. Hopefully you guys will join us back here for that next week. With that, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, but I'm happy to stay on a few minutes if anybody else would like to.